So this is a topic that's been on my mind for some time. And I would say it really started to surface a lot when the pandemic hit. And I noticed that I was listening to a lot of the music that I listened to early on in life. Uh, Also, following the passing of my brother, I think there was a nostalgic play there where I wanted to hear the music that he and I loved as kids and teenagers and young adults. But if I look at the timeline, the general timeline of my music consumption, early on, being raised in two households, my father's and my mother's, we were sort of split between. At my father's, we would hear a lot of classic rock, mostly Springsteen, Bob Seger, Jackson Brown, James Taylor. And then at my mother's, we would hear a lot of oldies. Elvis Presley. My mom and I were texting about Elvis Presley last night. Uh, Shout out to my buddy Mark, who loves the Elvis Memphis record. Um, she also listened to, she basically had a CBS 101.5 or 101.9 on in our house at all times, and that was oldies. A lot of Everly Brothers. Um, just a lot of great, great stuff. I remember her driving us around and playing those songs, and we were really exposed to a lot of great music. Then when I got to high school, early on in high school, I was exposed to hip hop for the first time, and for probably 2 years, was heavily into that world. I showed this to a buddy of mine a couple nights ago. These guys were one of my favorites. Boogie Down Productions, Criminal Minded. This is a 7-inch box set that I treasure. Eric B. and Rakim, Public Enemy. Dougie Fresh was a favorite. All the early classic hip hop stuff, which I still listen to and love. And then in high school, later years, I was more into, I found the sort of crowd that partied, I guess you could say. Listened to a lot of Grateful Dead, a little bit of Fish at the time, Steely Dan, Neil Young, Springsteen, AC/DC. It was, sort of the classic rock kids. And then in college, once 1994, when I discovered Uncle Tupelo, that's where everything completely shifted. And the majority of what I listen to up here is a result of that period. So everything from, excuse me, Townes Van Zandt to T-Rex to the Modern Lovers to what else we got? Bill Callahan, Yola Tango, Wilco, of course. Just goes on and on. Golden Smog, Eels, all the Dylan stuff, Sam Cooke, Lucinda Williams. I became sort of a bit of a music snob, I guess you could say. Alt country led me to everything. It led me to the Stooges and the Minutemen and John Cale. It was, Jeff Tweedy and Jay Farrar led me down so many different paths. And the sort of classic rock records that I loved in high school, I sort of abandoned. And it was a little bit of snootiness, I think. I thought, like, oh, I've moved past that. But as I mentioned, in the last few years, it's come back, and I now listen to it a lot. Because one thing I learned from my brother, and I can tell by all of his playlists, he did not care if something was cool or not. He had some songs that I remember he and I playing as kids. The Pointer Sisters. I mean, just Boz Scaggs. My brother had a very vast, deep love for music, but as evidenced by his playlists, he really couldn't care less what the public sentiment was for a band. If it was cool or not, he did not care. He listened to what he listened to. So here are some of those records that I loved early on in my listening life that have come back to me of late in the last few years that I have been absolutely loving. This is the one I've been listening to most over the past month, and this is not open yet. I've only been listening to it digitally. The Pink Floyd record, Animals. So I went to a college in Connecticut freshman year and then transferred out, and one of my roommates was a massive Pink Floyd fan. I remember Pink Floyd and Grateful Dead. He had cassette tapes of tons of Dead shows. They lined his whole wall, and everybody loved Pink Floyd. And this is the record that we listened to the most. We listened to a lot. We listened to The Final Cut, The Wall, Wish You Were Here, Metal. But Animals is the record we listen to all the time. I mean, I recently learned that it was reissued. I picked it up and I didn't think I was going to like it. And boy, was I wrong. I listened to it twice yesterday. So this is just a great record. I'm going to put it on after this video. Finally spin this. A lot of people talking about this record this year. Pink Floyd's Animals. A great one. This in high school, every weekend when we get together, this would go on. One from The Vault, Grateful Dead, which at the time I had no idea where the Great American Music Hall was. In San Francisco, of course. I've been there many times now. I saw the Grateful Dead twice in 1995, and I have rediscovered the Dead in a way that I never thought I would again. Also, partially probably due to the loss of one of my friends from high school, my buddy George, who's a huge Grateful Dead fan. George died about 10 years ago in a car accident. And after he passed, I listened to a lot of Grateful Dead, and it's only gotten stronger and stronger. I buy a lot of the Rhino reissues that are just remarkable. So I'm back into the Grateful Dead. Never thought I would be. Bob Seger, this is his greatest hits. I mean, these songs, Roll Me Away, Night Moves, Against the Wind, Main Street, Still the Same, You'll Accompany Me, Turn the Page. We heard so much of this growing up, and I've rediscovered Bob Seger and just absolutely love him. I think he's done touring, but if he were to tour again, I would go. One of the first concerts I ever saw, I'll tell you a funny story about that one day, when I was just a young kid, and I listen to Seger all the time now. It makes me think of my brother. Cat Stevens, been listening to, of late, have been waking up really early in the morning. I don't know, I go through different sleeping patterns, as we all do, and for some reason, the last week or two, I'm waking up really early. And I often just put some music on, and I've been putting on Cat Stevens because it's so relaxing. I mean, Where Do the Children Play? Wild World, of course. Father and Son, Hard-Headed Woman. Just, I absolutely love Bob Seger. I do love Bob Seger, but also Cat Stevens. This is an obvious one, and I never really stopped listening to Steely Dan, but the UHQRs that are coming out, I can't wait for. This Can't Buy a Thrill is I think it was in my top 10, or top 20 at least. My high school yearbook quote was from Midnight Cruiser. Only a Fool Would Say That, Kings, Dirty Work, Brooklyn, Turn That Heartbeat Over Again. My brother Lane loved this record. This is one of the records that really sort of connected us. Lots of Simon and Garfunkel. I'm sorry about the cough. Tons of Simon and Garfunkel. I think I mentioned that this show, the Central Park show, I remember I used to watch, grew up in New Jersey, and my parents would watch television downstairs, my mother and my stepfather, and I would often watch sports up in their room because they had a TV in their room. And I remember one day I landed on this. I think we had HBO briefly because we couldn't afford it. I can't remember why. Maybe we got a promo or something. And this concert came on, and I remember I've shared this story. My mom was calling me for dinner, and I begged her to miss dinner so I could keep watching this. I was probably 8 or 9. I think this is 1981. Just had a UPS delivery. Sorry about that. Hopefully I shouldn't have any problem merging these two videos. Simon and Garfunkel, we finished. Billy Joel, I started listening to him this week, and this was a record. Lane, my brother, loved Rosalinda's Eyes, and I still love that song. But My Life, Big Shot, Zanzibar, it reminds me of when we went to, my father took us to the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. And I think that was a big Bob Dylan, Billy Joel period for him, because when I hear these songs, I think of that trip. Two left. The Eagles. My brother loved the Eagles. And I shout out also to my buddy Jay, who was pushing the Eagles on me for so long, and I had like that snootiness where it's not cool to like the Eagles. Now I couldn't care less if it's cool to like them or not. I just like them. New Kid in Town, a little bit personal, but right after my brother died, a couple months later, I went back to New Jersey and spent a week or two with my mother. And during this period, you guys saw some of the videos. I was grieving pretty bad or pretty hard. And I remember one morning left my mother's house to go get coffee, and New Kid in Town came on, and I had to pull over because it just reminded me so much of my brother. He loved that song. So Wasted Time, Pretty Maids All in a Row, The Last Resort, of course, Hotel California. I don't care. I love that song. I think I pretended like I didn't forever. But I did and do. So I've been listening to the Eagles a ton lately. And finally, this sort of doesn't really fit into the others. This is a college record. The Counting Crows record, August and Everything After. I was a huge fan of the Counting Crows in college. Saw them live before they were really well known. My good buddy Brian, one of my dearest friends my whole life, who I should see more often than I do. I remember we saw them at Avalon, I think, in Boston. Axis or Avalon. I don't know if either of them are still there. And we sort of we had a big group and we split up. And Brian came down after the show and he had this in sort of a little poster, and he had Adam Duritz sign it and he handed it to me. And I have that. It's in my closet. I should take it out. I will take it out. It was such a nice gesture, one of the kindest things someone did for me in college, my buddy Brian. But I love this record. I still listen to it all the time. Omaha, Round Here, Sullivan Street, Raining in Baltimore. Excuse me. And that wraps it up. So just wanted to cover some records that I have been revisiting and now proud to say that I love. So thanks for watching, and I will be back soon. Take care.